Cool. We are live again, and we try to do this once in a while. Just hop on and answer your questions. I'm Ryan Ripken, and what do we got, Zach?
I got to take off we're not going live on Twitter because you have to be verified and your thing's going through that review process. So I'm just, okay, now we're.
Come on, guys. Come on, get them verified.
We're working. Well, no, I changed the handle on there, so that's why. Tragic.
Now we're live. It's live.
Now we're live. So we like to do this every once in a while for our viewers out there, and we're going to put this out. So hopefully if you join us right now. But I'm joined again by my go-to guy for every injury, every situation that you need to know what's going on with not only your favorite players, but maybe you'll learn a thing or two about your own body if things are going wrong, and that is Yoni Rosenblatt. I got it right this time. Thank goodness, Yoni. But Yoni, owner, founder of True Sports Physical Therapy, and he works constantly, for those that don't know, with all athletes, but specifically works with the high-intensity pro athletes in football, baseball, you name it. He handles it. Yoni, how are we doing today?
Thanks for having me back, Ryan. Good to be here.
Yeah, you're damn right we're back. Well, let's talk about this. Let's get into it because Orioles news and injuries, that's what's on people's minds. I feel like almost every single day. And let's start with the first one, which is the last time you and I talked. That was Grayson Rodriguez. And you were right spot on with that lat injury, lat strain. The good news is they believe Grayson's going to make his way back to Baltimore, hopefully by the end of September, which would put him right at the minimum of 6 weeks to be ready to go. So he's throwing off a mound, which we've heard. So talk a little bit about, in your mind, what could be some hurdles here before Grayson finally gets the green light?
So ideal scenario, he's going to have a few starts to ramp up. That is not the case now because, right, as you pointed out, Norfolk's wrapping up. So minor leagues are just about done. So he hopes to maybe get one rehab start before he's major league eligible. And then there's no one else for him to pitch. So I think what the Orioles have to do now is do a really good job of simulating game type scenarios so that they can make sure he is indeed ready when he gets back onto the mound. By the way, that is pitching off a mound, but it's also ways to mimic it in the weight room. So ways to load the arm, make sure that his arm is caught up, that he's taken a month off now from throwing off of the mound. So just to make sure that everything is moving properly so that when he hits the mound, end of season, maybe early postseason, he's ready to roll. So I'm sure the Orioles are checking all those boxes as we speak.
And obviously, it's a guy that we've talked about before, Yoni, that has dealt with a lat injury in the past. And we know you even said they're just a pain in the butt, because there's so many different layers of it. But realistically here, as far as being comfortable, and I was just looking at the video right now of Grayson throwing a bullpen session. In your mind here, as far as when it say he, it was a mild, low strain, low-grade strain. Then hypothetically, if we're looking at the end of September, can he feel like he's almost 100%? Like hypothetically, Grayson can be as close to as healthy as he possibly can be?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, he's going to feel good. The question I have is how many pitches does this guy have in the tank? It's totally different rehabbing to be a starting pitcher, which is where they need him. God knows they can use him at the back end of the bullpen as well. But those are drastically different from an arm load perspective. So if he comes back for a start, a big league start, end of the regular season, early postseason, I would expect some type of pitch count. You got to be careful with this guy because he hasn't had time to ramp up and really stretch himself out.
Yeah, and it's a great point you make, is that just because we just saw Zach Eflin go on the IL really quickly is actually coincidentally what Grayson did earlier in the season. Went on the IL, and as soon as those 15 days were up, he was back out pitching, didn't have a rehab assignment. But for Grayson Rodriguez, for going back to his game logs, Yoni, hasn't pitched since July 31st. So to your point exactly, that's a buildup there. So the Orioles are going to have something to figure out as we move closer. But at least on the positive side, as Birdland fans already know, Zach Eflin's pitched tremendously. Albert Suarez is on the bump for the Orioles in the White Sox-Orioles finale here in Baltimore. And then Corbin Burns, even though people are jumping up and down, still a really damn good pitcher, but Grayson can make this staff better. Let's go to the bullpen then. You talked about how Grayson, obviously, if he's limited, could go to the back end of the bullpen. Let's talk about two guys, but let's start with one. Jacob Webb was a guy that had some inflammation, specifically in his arm. It looks like he's going to be coming back to Baltimore soon. And if there's no hiccups there, and I know it's pretty vague on, the quote unquote inflammation, but clearly if you're able to get back and you're throwing rehab games, the inflammation has subsided. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. Here's what's interesting with Webb. And I hate to be glass half empty.
Yeah, no, you don't. You do this every time.
So only because I've seen a billion of these. So Webb had elbow inflammation, right? Which is a catch-all term. We don't really know what that means. It means his elbow was hurting him. Webb had a surgery, I think, in 2019 for posterior elbow impingement. So that's where the bones of your elbow bang into one another in the back. He had that cleaned up surgically, came back really strong. He's had a nice run since then. Mm-hmm. There is a high correlation between posterior elbow impingement surgeries and UCL issues. Now, it is important to note that the Orioles didn't list him as a UCL strain or anything UCL related, but the elbow's structure is compromised once they go in and shave out a piece of that bone. That does tend to lead to this elbow inflammation. So I'm not surprised to see it pop up. It's awesome that they calmed it down. I think it's a good short amount of time between now and when the Orioles win the World Series this year. But just something to keep your eyes on that, hey, he's kind of has one of these predictors for elbow injuries moving forward.
So with that being said, thank you again for being glass half empty here. Everyone on Twitter especially knows I like to try to stay more optimistic, but I do appreciate it.
Yin and yang, Rip.
That's why we work so well together. But for the most part. But context here is it's a very delicate situation. But Jacob Webb has been a pitcher for Baltimore where he has really found himself. I mean, he's been very solid. He had a really great start. Yes, just like every pitcher, had his moments of struggle, but he looks like a guy that you definitely want in your bullpen here down the stretch. And another guy we talked about earlier, Yoni, that's had a little bit more, I wouldn't say it's complications, but because specifically he had surgery or had the bone chips removed, and that's Danny Coulombe, who they are getting optimistic about. Right now, the timeline, nothing really has fully changed. Besides that he got to face some batters the other day, he's throwing off a mound. Walk us through that process now. It seems like he's cleared certain hurdles. What else does he have to clear here before you feel good about where he is and getting back on the mound in the big leagues?
Well, I think he obviously seeing some live action is awesome. And I think that's important to note also. You can see Grayson throwing his pen on Twitter, and the guy looks like he's going about 50% effort. Once you put a batter up there like Coulombe's going through, it's just a marker of, hey, that's another hurdle to cross. So that is a great reason to be positive on Coulombe coming back. And I think that's why they're so optimistic that he's already seeing some live action. I would want to see him just see how many pitches can you layer on top of one another and how do you recover, right? And specifically in Coulombe with a guy who's going to pitch back-to-back nights, how does he bounce back from that? So seeing it once is awesome. What does he look like on back-to-back pens or something like that? I think that'll give you more. There you go. Look at the balloons flying around. I mean, everyone is positive on Coulombe coming back.
Well, everyone's getting excited about it now, Yoni, right? There it is. But I think the one thing I really took away from you right there was the next day, the next outing, the next bullpen session, because it's that extra repetition, especially for a guy like Danny, which you hope you can use him, frequently, regularly. Is he going to be able to do that? That was something that the Orioles counted on because of the fact of his success. I mean, he's 2.42 ERA on the season, and the Orioles at the time when him and Jacob Webb were put on the IL, and actually Danny Coulombe beforehand, Orioles did have the fourth best bullpen ERA in the big leagues, and a big part of that was a guy like Danny Coulombe who Brandon Hyde literally didn't matter. Bases loaded, extra inning, 6th inning, 9th inning, didn't matter what happened. Danny was getting in the game and was having success. So we're excited about that. Let's switch away from pitching here, Yoni. We understand where that all stands at the moment. But let's talk about then a player where earlier in the season, so many fans were saying, hey, get this guy out of here. I didn't agree with that. That's just what other people told me. It was a guy that knew his role, and when the time was needed for him to step up, he would be prepared. And I'll tell you what, he was so damn hot and on fire and really firing on all cylinders for an offense that was struggling. You guys can probably take a guess. It's Ramon Urias. Now he's on the IL, and we know he's has an ankle sprain. He was on crutches, and Yoni, I'm cringing because I've had my ankle injuries. Right now, it's just a 10-day IL, but you and I both know the ankles are so tricky, and the fact that he was still on crutches doesn't seem like it's something that is an immediate answer that he's going to get back, but maybe touch on of what Ramon has to face here in order to get back to helping the ball club.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is how rapidly he can start working on lateral motion. So how secure is he moving side to side? Obviously, that's super important for an infielder. And I have far more comfort that he's going to be ready rapidly, because I think these ankle things can go quickly. And you can get up to a major league level and perform at a high level while you're playing, while you continue the rehab process. Different than an arm. Like an arm, you got to check off every single box, be 100% by the time you get on there. I think we can look forward to seeing him sooner rather than later, as opposed to the arms where we really want to take our time. How's that for glass half full?
That was nice.
That was positive.
How did that feel?
Felt good. Thanks, Rip. Thanks for teaching me that.
That felt great. And that is the part of it, at least in this sport, in this situation. So many things, at least not compared to pitching, but for ankles or whatever everything else, there is a pain tolerance that you can handle. How stable is the ankle is the biggest thing. I remember going through so many of those physical therapy sessions of trying to gain strength back. So for Ramon, it is something you hope it's sooner than later. It's a guy that definitely was solidified now. The Orioles have had the next man up. Manuel Rivera has played well. Kobe Mayo has been back up, even with limited opportunity. So I'm glad you can touch on it. And Ramon, who would have thought that Ramon Urias over the last 3 weeks would have been one of the, if not hottest hitters for Baltimore. And that's definitely one that we are going to monitor. I think that's the big injuries, except there's one more here. And I saw
one more quick point, Rip, is just around the ankle is you're talking about a joint that is braceable. So different than elbow and shoulder, right? So if they can get him in a brace and they can, how do I stop the balloons, dude? If we can get Urias in a brace, so you can tape him, you can put him in a brace to add external support. So it's not just the balance and stability exercises. I just think that should give Birdland some more hope that he'll be back quick.
Yeah, and that's actually what I'm glad you're saying. There is a big difference, big difference. And I think that's the point we're trying to emphasize. And yeah, there's nothing ruling out there with Ramon and ankles. You have a better idea of what timelines can be. Like I said, the arms can be a little bit more, fragile, to say the least. Fragile is a good word. New to the channel, like and subscribe button here. Talking Orioles injuries here with Dr. Yoni Rosenblatt, True Sports Physical Therapy. You got a question about an injury, you're looking for help. I'm not kidding you when the guy knows what he's talking about here. And even when I don't want him to be right, and I know he's going to be right, but it's better you guys hear it from him, so I'm not the bad guy. One other newsworthy injury part before we'll answer a couple questions here was Heston Kjerstad. It looks like he's going to start a rehab assignment soon in the minor leagues. That's what Brandon Hyde said. The reality, and you touched on this, talk about something that's can be very unpredictable, concussions. And Heston clearly has had some effects that have impacted him. I'm going back now to that series against the Yankees was right before the All-Star break, and he's still trying to find his footing. This has to be a positive, though, that they're saying, hey, you've cleared this one part. We feel comfortable enough, but there should be a little bit of hesitancy, correct? Because you've dealt with players that have dealt with concussions and they have long-lasting impacts.
For sure. And by the way, specifically in baseball, we might have touched on this last time, but the amount of tracking you have to do in baseball on a very small object like the ball, and the way you have to follow the ball past the backdrop of the stands. So it's got to move through all those fans. Then it comes up into the lights. Then you have to track that ball as you're moving. All of those things are a concussion nightmare because you're dealing with changes in backgrounds, and your brain has to understand where that ball is, and it's competing with light, which we know the body becomes very sensitive to following a concussion. And then you're competing with a moving background of the fans, and your body's moving. It's a nightmare to try to rehab that. So it is an awesome sign that they're putting him back in a rehab assignment. He's going to be able to work through all of those nuances of lighting factors, of tracking an object while he's moving, and the fuzzy background of the fans and the stands. So it's a great opportunity to work on that and see how he bounces back. But it's highly unpredictable. I wish I had a better timeline of, hey, 2 rehab starts and he'll be ready.
Well, you gave great examples, because even right now, I'm trying to find my bat. It's on the ground here. I'll pick it up. There we go. It's like, but so, Yoni, essentially you're right. I mean, for a hitter, if I'm looking at the camera here and all of a sudden, though, you're not even thinking about, well, one, you should be thinking about if you're trying to locate a ball and trying to see what the movements are, what's the speed, what's the location. And then on top of it, you have then the back layers of whatever you're not focusing on, but you can see whether it is the backdrop that's there, whether it's the pitcher or the center fielder that's way in the background, and you don't know how your mind's going to react is kind of what you're saying. You're hoping it's moving in the right direction, but that's where people get hesitant, is how do you react? But like you said, Heston is moving in the right direction. They obviously feel better that he's going out there to get at bats. Now we just hope that Heston feels good, because concussions just have so many different variances. And in a sport where you really need to have control, and it's different. I know that concussions, vertigo, different circumstances, Yoni, but still the same thing. If it's messing with your hand-eye, obviously it's going to be really damn hard to play the game of baseball.
Yeah, and I think the example you give with the bat is the simple example. I'm more worried about what he looks like in the field when he's got to track a fly ball. I mentioned all the visual disturbances that transpire while you're trying to track a fly ball. The other thing is, we know concussions have difficulty with increases in heart rate. So as you're going to chase a fly ball, your heart rate elevates. That actually messes with your depth perception and what transpires around your eyes. That's where I'm more concerned. So I'm sure he's been shagging flies. It's totally different when it's bottom of the ninth and 2 outs and that ball gets popped into the outfield. Now you're tracking. Now your heart rate's elevated. You're sprinting. That's what I'm worried about. That's what he's going to be working through while he does his rehab assignment.
Well, and the Orioles obviously would love him back. But again, does he get to have that magic that he had? And hopefully the biggest thing above all is that Heston Kjerstad is healthy and feeling better. That's what we want first. And secondly, being able to help the team. Another guy, actually, God, there's so many injuries, so many things here. You know, it's unbelievable. But Jordan Westberg was starting to throw, and obviously this one's a little bit more, maybe of all the situations here, is a little bit more cut and dry, because – and I'm trying to find the specific bone that was broken, or with the hand for him. Or what was the bone? I just had it up right here. And of course, technical difficulties for me. Just had it here. Tomato. Come on. Can't find it. But what we do know is, we'll just throw this around. He's taking grounders with his right hand fracture. It's not giving the specific on it, but that's a little bit more cut and dry, Yoni. They said they hope to get him back right around the postseason is the goal. And with fractures, especially if it's a clean fracture, where, you know, you're not having any complex situations, you don't have to get surgery. You just got to let it heal. And if that goes properly, Jordan Westberg should be ready on the timeline that they've been putting out there.
Yeah, what's nice about that is you can see it on X-ray. Hey, it's getting better or it's not. It's the exact opposite with Kjerstad, right? You can't image a concussion and see how well they're doing. So I think the future does look bright for Westberg because they'll be able to tell quickly, hey, it's healed. Okay, you can push through some discomfort. Let's get you back on the diamond.
See, and there it is. And Jordan Westberg's a guy, honestly, when the Orioles were having some offensive struggles, he was one of their best situational hitters with 2 outs, runners in scoring position. Obviously, to me, is a really solid overall player, good defensively. It's a guy you want in your lineup. And then there's Ramon Mountcastle that's dealing with a sprained wrist. So talk to me about with sprains compared to fractures here, because it's the same concept. How extreme is the sprain here? But how quickly or how long could you expect with Ramon Mountcastle? I assume it's going to be on the quicker side, but that's where things can be a little bit more. I want to be a little bit more cautious because of that. The situations that we talked about with even with ankles, how bad is the sprain?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of you can't brace a sprain of a wrist the same way you can of an ankle, right? So you have to have a little bit more motion at the wrist, especially playing baseball. They've come a long way with imaging of ligaments. So they're able to see the degree of sprain, how well it's healing. But a lot of times that pain will stick around. But if you got good medical coverage, they'll be able to say, hey, it's just like with the fracture. It is healed. You can push through a little bit of discomfort. You'll also see that show up on the rehab side where the Orioles are able to load those ligaments a little bit more aggressively once they kind of get the clearance from the imaging, from the ultrasound imaging or MRI imaging, to see how well that ligament has healed itself back together.
Yeah, and that's the part of it that I'm glad you bring that up with it, because the intricacies of how it all is. In some cases, you might think that, hey, it's simple, or why isn't it this way? But some cases you really don't know, like you just mentioned, when it comes to brain situations or injuries. That's hard to really tell. But when it comes to fractures, when it comes to sprains, you can get some immediate results about feedback is what we want to talk about. So at least on that sense, doesn't seem like a big concern. But obviously the Orioles, it's crazy, Yoni, how banged up they've been and where they are right now. And still, what I try to tell people, a lot of teams with this many injuries, they wouldn't be where they are, which is 81 wins, first in the American League. They are that talented, they're that deep, and hopefully they get healthy enough down the stretch. I see a couple. Let's open it up to a couple comments here, because this is what people love about it. Yeah, new to the channel, hit that like and subscribe. Ryan Ripken Show channel. We go live every Monday and Thursday, and sometimes when I got a great guest like Yoni on to talk about injuries, why wouldn't I hop on here? And then also to remind people, football is right around the corner. We have a special pregame show for the Ravens and Chiefs tomorrow. Well before the game, we have a lot of giveaways that are going on. We're trying to make this a fun experience. And guess who's going to be back on for injuries? Hopefully the Ravens have none. Unfortunately, it's going to happen. None to Nick Moore, please. None to Nick Moore. None to Nick Moore. Pro Bowl 2024 for the long snapper for the Baltimore Ravens. But Yoni will be on to talk about those football injuries. Like I said, Yoni's your go-to guy when it comes to anything injury-related, both in sports and personally. And all honesty, you guys can reach out to True Sports Physical Therapy. Back to the questions now. I saw some things here, and I know the chat likes to have some fun. Nick, I saw you kept brought up about Felix. Look, Felix Bautista and Yoni, you can talk about this. We understand, people are going, wouldn't it be a great story if Felix came and pitched in the postseason? That's a very risky thing, in my opinion, but maybe you can touch on the process and what you think should be the case here for the Mountain as we approach the postseason for Baltimore.
Remind me again, when did he have surgery?
It was back. He tried to come back, and I believe the surgery was roughly right around the postseason time last year, so almost a year.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's right there. So the question, he's right there from a physiologic perspective, like, has the surgery healed? The question is, how has everything else been going? Is his shoulder exactly where we need it to be? I know it's an elbow injury. Are his hips doing what we want it to do? Or is his lower half doing what he wants to do? And then you think about risk reward. Like, hell yeah, this is sometimes you only get one shot at the crown, and so maybe it's worth it to risk it. But there's also a player perspective here. The guy's got a number of years ahead of him. Does he want to risk it? The earlier you come back, the higher the risk will be. And so I think it's a risk reward scenario where the Orioles may look at it one way and the player may look at it in a very different light. And it's just a question of whether they can coalesce. Great story, but he's got a lot of boxes to check before he's ready to take the mound.
And I think that's the biggest part, is a lot of boxes to check. And what essentially you're going to do is throw Felix. If you were to do this, you'd throw him right into the fire without really ramping up. And I know that people talk about, oh, well, if he throws bullpens, he throws sim games. It's different. It's not the same intensity.
Yeah,
it's not. There's nothing like game reps, being in the moment. And you're talking about that in the postseason, biggest moments here. I would personally rather have a healthy Felix Bautista to be your closer for the next 3 to 5 years than risk an opportunity right now where he's teetering on getting right. So yeah. I think we're on the same wavelength there. Kyle Bradish was talked about here. Yoni, I saw that. There's a couple comments here. Where was that earlier? Dude, will Kyle Bradish, Eli said, be back by the end of next year, or do we have to wait until 2026 to see him again? And we talked about Kyle Bradish, I think, multiple times here, Yoni. I was going to say 3, 4, maybe 5. Where, for all of our listeners out there, we did the timeline. So we had the surgery in June, and where he is right now. Your opinion, could we see Kyle Bradish pitch at the end of the 2025 season?
Hell yeah. Ask me a hard one, Rip. I mean, I can expound upon that, but I sure as hell hope he's ready by then.
Yeah, well, it's good to know. And you try to say, depending on the different variations of what they say, I think like Tommy John gets thrown into UCL construction, as you've said, it gets thrown into 2 different categories, but everyone thinks it's the same thing. But roughly, we're looking at a year to 14 months max, right? That's what we've said in the past.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that, that's just kind of the reality. So
reality, but it speaks to a lot of what we just talked about. You know, you put a closer on the mound in the postseason. It's one thing whether he's physiologically ready. The guy hasn't had a runner on third in a tie game in a year. You know, by getting Bradish back by middle of next season, he's got time to, one, get right physically, but also mentally and kind of in mental game shape so that he sets up beautifully for the postseason. So I think it's a great opportunity to do that. 12 to 14 months for Tommy John is the max, I would say, right? Like, he better be back by 12 to 14 months. And if he had the internal brace, we talked about the nuances there, he should be ready even before then. So I think it's totally reasonable to put your money on seeing Bradish in 25.
Well, there we go. And obviously the Orioles would love it, but that's another reason why they went out and made some trades at the deadline to have guys under team control. So far, the Zach Eflin one has looked phenomenal. Trevor Rogers, unfortunately, is not helping the team in 24 the way that he hoped, but he's under control for the next couple of years. And as we know for Baltimore, we know that certain contracts and situations have to be figured out, but we're looking at who they lost this year. Tyler Wells, Kyle Bradish, John Means, in their starting rotation alone with multiple IL stints for Grayson Rodriguez. That's just the reality, the nature of the beast, Yoni, for baseball and for sports, but that's why we have you on, to try to make it easier, even though if everyone – so for those that are tuning in, Yoni's being way more positive than I thought he'd be. So he is. Yeah, you know, and I'm proud.
I'm learning.
You are learning. But you know what? And also, Eli, Corbin Burns, you're right. That's one that we don't know what could happen with Corbin Burns. Maybe he's around. Maybe he isn't. I know a lot of people are saying he's not an ace. Please stop with that conversation. He's been phenomenal up until August. He still has the 11th best, 10th best ERA in all of baseball. And he had really, really bad back-to-back starts. Well, specifically Red Sox The other ones, you guys know how I feel. I broke it down. He's going to be just fine. One more fun thing here. I saw someone said, I think, where was it? Get you out of here then. Oh, where did the comments go? Yeah, I know with Westberg, guys, if Westberg comes back, what's that mean for Kobe? If Westberg's healthy, the reality is he's going to play. That's your guy. He's really damn good. It's nothing against Kobe, but Jordan Westberg was an all-star for a reason, so you got to roll with one of the guys that helped you get there. Why can't I find these comments?
While you look for it, Rip, here's the question that's on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Why the hell did the Orioles have so many injuries?
Why? Why? Is that a rhetorical question?
No, I'm not setting myself up. I'm asking you, the baseball guy. If I'm the medical guy, you're the baseball guy. What's your answer as the baseball guy?
I think as far as pitching goes, and the style of training has drastically changed. The amount of stress and strain that pitchers are putting on their bodies throughout the course of strength training to then preparing to pitch for a season. Guys aren't giving themselves, in my mind, a little bit more of maybe the rest that you would need. It was funny, honey. Wasn't there a time, and I talked to Buck Showalter about this too, and again, this isn't, the velocities, everything's increased. So therefore the risk is going to be higher because you know better than anyone, Yoni. It's an unnatural move for guys to throw. But there are so many people in my mind that feel like you got to do more and more. And sometimes you just have to figure out what is best for your body. And also sometimes rest and trying to reset is the best thing for it. And for some of these guys, especially that I know will go to Driveline in the off season and try to pick up velo, it's probably during times when you are not looking to, put that stress and strain on your body on top of it. So that's where I kind of go with it. I know that it's their job, it's their responsibilities, but I remember even with my dad growing up, when he was done playing, he said, I'm unless there's only 1 or 2 years maybe in his career, he's like, I'm going to keep working on something with hitting because I feel like I'm finding something. So I'm going to stay with that. But the other part is he goes, I need to reset my mind, reset my body, and try to put myself in a position so I can maybe do some workouts, light workouts, but baseball specific, he'd wait until December to really start to kind of ramp it up. And it still was very gradual. I mean, you see it now, Yoni, with a lot of guys. I mean, a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, the training is full year round now. And we're not talking about
full year. It's full year. And I think it's a good example with your dad because from what I understand, he was a hell of a basketball player, right? Like he was playing multiple sports. And I think there's something to that where you're not just beating the body down in one specific way. Once you start learning and embracing other movement patterns, I think it gives the body a chance to recover. So maybe there's something to that. It's not just that they train all year, but that they're training the same thing all year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is the biggest part. I always felt, and anyone that's out here listening for this, I've talked to a lot more scouts about this. And even when I've worked with certain kids doing some lessons or, just being around the baseball world, the constant thing, Yoni, that they say when I even had this specifically, had someone come and look at a high school kid, a scout. And he didn't say, hey, how have you been playing? What's your position? They said the first question that was asked was, what sports do you play? Plural. Yeah. And the response was from the scouts, we are looking for multi-sport type players that are not just one-dimensional because we truly believe your body adjusts and reacts the right way. And if you're doing the same things over and over again, they also are worried about possible injuries, re-injuries, because it's the same training. I mean, you see it all the time. Great question. You know what? This is why I like you, Yoni.
You're a hell of a guest, Rip. You are a hell of a guest. Thanks for joining the Ryan Ripken Show.
Gosh, Yoni, I can't wait. We're going to have you on a lot more especially when our schedules align.
In studio with Nick Moore, if there's room for us in that studio.
There's always room for you guys. You kidding me? We will set that up, and maybe that can get Nick to guarantee to get his butt down here. So for those that are, again, watching, we're talking Orioles here. Tomorrow, going to have a pregame show talking Ravens. We might have another guest in here that you really like that's involved with the Orioles. You didn't hear it from me. But we are going to have that going on, Ravens-Chiefs tomorrow night. But through the whole football season after baseball ends, Yoni is going to continue to give his expert analysis on how the body works and how your favorite athletes or players are going to recover. Hopefully we have the glass half full approach, but Yoni's going to tell us how it is, and we don't want it any other way. So, Yoni, on the way out here, besides that you are the guru for the Ryan Ripken Show, what else do you have going where people can find you?
So we're all over the place. We got 11 clinics throughout the state of Maryland. That's probably most applicable to your audience. We've also got clinics in Pennsylvania and Delaware. We have some outstanding running experts in Baltimore City, both in Locust Point and in Fells Point. That's worth checking out. And if you play lacrosse, if you play soccer, if you play baseball, you need to see us before you get injured. And like I said, we're throughout the state. In network with your insurance, we would love to help fans of the Ryan Ripken Show.
Boom. We all would love that. At the end of the day, what Yoni and his group's trying to do is just put people in the best position to either chase their goals or just stay healthy and enjoy their life and the way of living. That's what you want. At the end of the day, you want to feel good, and you got to feel good to hopefully play good. Unless you're just that damn good, then hey, but I don't want to be hurting all the time, Yoni. You and I both feel that way. Hey, I appreciate you. For everyone else out there, appreciate you guys. And Eli on the way out, wear a cup. It's not worth it, man. Always wear a cup. Yeah, I'll tell you more of my stories, and I'll tell you some horror stories of some players. And man, but for your own sake, for anyone's sake, wear a cup. It's better than nothing. All right, guys, that does it for this special edition where we were talking with Dr. Yoni Rosenblatt of True Sports Physical Therapy. We'll be back again. See you tomorrow. Have a day. Have a night.
Thanks, Red.